Welcome to a hidden chapter of television history that is about to change everything you thought you knew about the highest paid actor in the industry. Today, we are peeling back the curtain on a secret that Hollywood studios try to keep buried under lock and key. Under the title, Jim Parsons said no to this role, and fans couldn't believe it. We dive into the exact moment the career of the man who gave life to Sheldon Cooper almost collapsed because of a decision no one saw coming. Imagine having the world at your feet, earning $1 million per episode, and being the face of the most successful sitcom on the planet, only to say no to a proposal that could have changed everything. What really happened behind closed doors? Why did Jim Parsons reject a role that promised to be even bigger than Sheldon? Stay with us until the very end of this video, because the truth about the ultimatum given by the producers and the shocking reaction from his castmates will leave you speechless. Before we uncover this mystery, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button right now. Your support is vital for us to keep revealing Hollywood's darkest secrets. If you value our work, you can support us with a super thanks or simply comment. Do you think Jim Parsons made the right call? Get ready, because the truth is finally coming to light. To truly grasp why Jim Parsons' decision to say no sent shockwaves through the multi-billion-dollar machinery of Hollywood, we first have to dismantle the myth of the happy superstar. By the mid-2010s, Jim Parsons wasn't just an actor. He was a global commodity. The Big Bang Theory had evolved into a cultural titan, broadcast in over 70 countries and generating billions in syndication revenue. Jim was at the epicenter of this hurricane, earning a staggering $1 million per episode, plus a significant percentage of the back-end profits. On paper, he had achieved the ultimate American dream. However, behind the scenes, the golden cage was beginning to tighten. The character of Sheldon Cooper, a role he played with surgical precision, had become so iconic that it was effectively erasing Jim Parsons the artist. He was no longer being seen as a versatile performer. He was being seen as a cash cow for the network and the studio. The mystery begins during a hiatus between seasons, when a major film studio approached Jim's team with a proposal that was described as the opportunity of a lifetime. This wasn't just any supporting role. It was a lead character in a massive, big-budget franchise reboot, a role that required a multi-film commitment spanning over a decade. The industry expected him to jump at it. In Hollywood logic, you use your TV fame to pivot into a forever movie franchise. It was the path paved by legends before him. But as Jim sat in his home, reading the script for the third time, a sense of profound dread began to wash over him. The role, while lucrative, was a caricature. It lacked the intellectual depth he craved, and more importantly, it would have locked him into a contract that essentially signed away his 40s and 50s to a corporate image. The pressure from his agents and managers was immense. "You can't say no to this," they told him. "This is the role that ensures you never have to work again." But Jim was already wealthy beyond his wildest imagination. What he lacked was creative autonomy. When he finally uttered the word no, the room went cold. It wasn't just a rejection of the job. It was a rejection of the Hollywood game. The studio executives were insulted. They weren't used to being told no by a sitcom star. Almost immediately, whispers began to circulate in the high-rise offices of Burbank. They characterized Jim as difficult, unfocused, and ungrateful. This first act of defiance was the spark that lit the fuse. It wasn't just about this one movie role. It was about Jim realizing that if he didn't start saying no now, he would be Sheldon Cooper until the day he died. He began to look at his contract for The Big Bang Theory with a new set of eyes, realizing that the producers were already planning season 13, 14, and beyond. They wanted to keep the machine running until the wheels fell off. But Jim was tired. He was grieving the loss of his father and his beloved dog, and he was starting to feel the physical and mental toll of maintaining Sheldon's rigid, high-energy persona for 24 episodes a year. The no he gave to the movie studio was a rehearsal for the much bigger no that was coming for the show that made him famous. Behind the scenes, a Cold War began. The studio tried to entice him with even more money, figures that would have made him the highest paid television actor in the history of the medium by a massive margin. They thought every man had a price. They didn't realize that Jim Parsons was looking for something money couldn't buy: peace of mind. The tension during the table reads became palpable. While the audience saw the same old Sheldon, the cast and crew saw a man who was increasingly distant, a man who was mentally packing his bags. The producers were terrified. If Jim left, the show was over. Hundreds of jobs were at stake. Millions in future revenue would vanish. They decided to play hardball, setting the stage for a confrontation that would eventually lead to one of the most shocking cancellations in TV history. Jim was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that by choosing his integrity, he was risking a massive industry-wide backlash. He was about to find out exactly how much power a single actor has when they are willing to walk away from everything. The no he said to that first role was just the beginning of a transformation that would leave fans, executives, and his fellow actors in a state of absolute disbelief. As the fallout from his initial no began to ripple through the industry, Jim Parsons found himself at the center of a psychological chess match that would determine the fate of the most profitable sitcom of the 21st century. In this second chapter, we look into the high-stakes negotiations that turned the Big Bang Theory set into a pressure cooker, because the truth that was kept from the public for years is that the studio didn't just want Jim to stay. They tried to trap him. Following his refusal to join the massive film franchise, Warner Brothers and CBS executives realized that Jim was no longer motivated by money. This terrified them. To the corporate machine, an actor who cannot be bought is an actor who cannot be controlled. In a desperate move to secure at least 2 more seasons, the network reportedly prepared a contract that would have paid Jim upwards of $50 million for just 48 more episodes. It was a figure so large it was meant to be impossible to refuse. But while the lawyers were crunching numbers, Jim was reaching a breaking point. The mystery of his no deepened during production of Season 12. Jim began to experience a series of personal omens that convinced him his time was up. He was exhausted, not just from the grueling schedule, but from the intellectual weight of playing Sheldon. The mask was starting to crack. He famously described a moment of clarity that occurred while he was walking his dog, realizing that he was the same age his father was when he passed away. It was a haunting realization. If you told me that, like my father, I had 6 years left to live, is there anything else I want to do? The answer was a resounding yes, and it did involve a laugh track. The tension reached its peak during a secret meeting in the summer of 2018. Chuck Lorre, the show's creator and one of the most powerful men in television, called the Core 5 cast members into his office. The producers were confident. They believed that with enough zeros on the check, the cast would sign on for seasons 13 and 14. But when the question was finally put to the room, Jim Parsons didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for more money. He didn't ask for executive producer credit. He simply said, "I don't think I can continue." The room went deathly silent. This wasn't just a contract negotiation anymore. It was the death knell of an empire. The producers tried to pivot, offering him a reduced schedule or even a spin-off. But Jim stood his ground. He was saying no to the very thing that had defined his life for over a decade. The shock among his co-stars was immediate and devastating. Kaylee Cuoco and Johnny Galecki had reportedly entered that meeting under the impression they were all there to sign a new deal together. When Jim made his announcement, the emotional foundation of the show crumbled. The fallout was immediate. Sources close to production claimed there were tears, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. Some cast members felt that Jim was blindsiding them, putting hundreds of crew members' jobs at risk. But Jim wasn't acting out of malice. He was acting out of survival. He knew that if he stayed for the money, he would be betraying the character of Sheldon and, more importantly, himself. The studio's reaction was a mix of panic and fury. They realized that without Sheldon, there was no Big Bang Theory. They had a choice: continue the show without its lead or cancel the #1 show on television. Within 24 hours of Jim's no, the decision was made to pull the plug on the entire series. The fans were told it was a mutual creative decision, but the truth was far more dramatic. One man's refusal to be a prisoner of his own success had just ended a billion-dollar era. Jim walked out of that meeting knowing his life would never be the same. He had just walked away from more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes, and in doing so, he had become the most controversial man in Hollywood. But the storm was only beginning. As the news of the cancellation leaked, the public's reaction was a mixture of grief and confusion, and a no that Jim Parsons said would soon lead him into a new kind of battle, one where he would prove he was more than just a man with a catchphrase. As the news of the show's cancellation hit the front pages of every major entertainment outlet, the initial shock quickly turned into something far more aggressive, a coordinated industry backlash that threatened to permanently end Jim Parsons' career. In this third chapter, we uncover the hidden Cold War that occurred between the announcement of the end and the filming of the final episode. Because while fans were mourning, the power players in Hollywood were looking for someone to blame. The mystery of Jim's no took a dark turn when rumors began to circulate that major network executives were blacklisting him behind the scenes. The narrative being pushed was that Jim was ungrateful and had killed the golden goose, leaving his castmates and crew of over 200 people unemployed. The pressure was designed to make him buckle, to make him crawl back and beg for season 13 just to save his reputation. Sources from within production offices at Warner Brothers recall a period of icy silence on the set. It was reported that for several weeks, the camaraderie that had defined the show for over a decade vanished. Some of his co-stars, specifically those who were not yet ready to say goodbye to their million-dollar salaries, reportedly gave him the cold shoulder, creating a workspace that was tense, awkward, and filled with unspoken resentment. Jim found himself in a paradox. He was the most famous man on TV, yet he was becoming an outcast within his own industry. The no he had said to the blockbuster movie role and the no he had said to the show's extension had labeled him as unreliable in the eyes of corporate Hollywood. But what the executives didn't realize was that Jim was already planning his great escape. While they were trying to punish him, Jim was secretly negotiating to return to his first love, the theater. The truth that fans couldn't believe was that Jim was willing to trade the glitz of a multi-camera sitcom for the grueling, lower-paying world of Broadway. He chose to star in a revival of The Boys and the Band, a deeply personal project that allowed him to explore his identity as a gay man and a serious dramatic actor. Parts of himself he felt had been suppressed by the Sheldon brand. This move was seen by many as career suicide. Why go back to the stage when you can own the screen? His critics asked. But for Jim, the stage was the only place where he could prove that he wasn't just a caricature with a bazinga catchphrase. However, the psychological toll was massive. Jim later admitted that during the filming of the final season, he felt like he was attending his own funeral every single day. He was plagued by guilt, wondering if his need for creative freedom had truly hurt the people he cared about. The industry watched closely, waiting for him to fail. There was a prevailing theory in Hollywood that TV stars stay TV stars, and many were betting that once the Big Bang checks stopped coming, Jim would fade into irrelevance. But the most shocking moment of this period happened during a private rehearsal, where Jim reportedly broke down in tears, realizing that by saying no to the role the world wanted him to play, he was finally saying yes to himself. He was shedding the skin of a character that had become a straitjacket. Little did he know, the final episode of the show would not be the end of the drama, but the beginning of a legal and professional battle over his legacy that would reach all the way to the highest levels of the network. Part 4. The Final Curtain and the Billion-Dollar Legacy. The final day of filming The Big Bang Theory was not just the end of a show. It was a conclusion of a decade-long social experiment that had turned an awkward ensemble into the most powerful group in Hollywood history. In this final chapter, we reveal the raw, unscripted emotions of that last walk across stage 25 and the shocking truth about how Jim Parsons managed to survive the industry's attempt to bury him. On May 1st, 2019, the atmosphere on the Warner Brothers lot was electric, with a mixture of grief and finality. The mystery that fans still wonder about is, how did the tension between the cast resolve? Reports from that day suggest that a private peace summit occurred in Jim's trailer hours before the final taping. Realizing that their lives were about to change forever, the cast, including Kaylee Cuoco and Johnny Galecki, reportedly set aside their resentment. They made a secret pact to protect the legacy of what they had built, deciding that regardless of the friction caused by the cancellation, they would present a united front to the world. They realized that Jim hadn't killed the show. He had simply given it a dignified death before it became a parody of itself. But the real drama happened when the cameras stopped rolling for the last time. As the set was being struck and the iconic living room was literally dismantled, Jim Parsons did something no one expected. He didn't head to a rap party or a press junket. He retreated into silence. The industry was waiting for his next big move, expecting him to announce a massive movie deal to justify walking away from $50 million. Instead, Jim vanished into the world of production and prestige drama. He leaned into projects like Hollywood and The Boys and the Band, intentionally choosing roles that were the antithesis of Sheldon Cooper. The blacklist that had been threatened by angry executives began to crumble for one simple reason. Jim Parsons was still a ratings magnet. Even in his absence, the show's reruns and the spin-off Young Sheldon, which Jim continued to voice and executive produce, were generating billions. The network realized they couldn't afford to hate him. Jim had won the war of nerves. He had proven that an actor's greatest power isn't their salary, but their willingness to say no and mean it. Today, fans look back at the end of the series with a new perspective. While many were heartbroken at the time, there is now a widespread belief that Jim saved the show's legacy by ending it on a high note. Had they stayed for seasons 13 and 14 just for the paycheck, the quality likely would have dipped, tarnishing the show's place in history. Jim's no was actually an act of preservation. Jim Parsons now lives a life of quiet creative freedom. He has traded the grueling 24-episode a-year cycle for projects that stir his soul. When asked in interviews about the millions of dollars he left on the table, his answer is always the same: a calm, centered smile and a reminder that enough is enough. He broke the cycle of Hollywood greed, proving that you could be the biggest star in the world and still choose to walk away to find out who you really are. The man who played a genius for 12 years made the smartest move of all. He chose his happiness over a corporate empire. And as the final lights dimmed on the set of Apartment 4A, Jim Parsons walked away not as a sitcom character, but as a man who finally owned his own future. Conclusion: the power of no. Jim Parsons' story is a powerful reminder that in a world that always demands more, there's immense strength in knowing when you have had enough. He faced down the most powerful executives in the world, risked his reputation, and walked away from a fortune, all to protect his artistic integrity. What do you think? Did Jim Parsons make the right choice by ending the show, or should he have stayed for fans? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the secret history of Hollywood's biggest decisions, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps us keep bringing you the truth behind the fame. And if you really want to help us out, consider sending us super thanks. It goes a long way in helping us produce these long-form investigative videos. Now, don't leave just yet. Click the video on your screen right now to discover another shocking story of an actor who risked it all at the height of their fame. You won't believe what happened next.